Today on TimesCast, operations resumed at New York's airports on Tuesday morning, but the backlog will take days to clear.
It's a bit like an impromptu campsite here still at JFK.
With U.S. troops expected to leave Iraq in 2011, we look at the progress made so far this year. And the sexual abuse scandal is not over for the Catholic Church.
This is Noah Rosenberg reporting for the New York Times from JFK Airport. We're at day 3 of the fallout from the blizzard, and things are starting to get back to normal here at the airport. The departure boards aren't quite glowing, all around with the yellow cancellation notices. A lot of flights are back up. Obviously, still some major delays. I've talked to quite a few passengers this morning who are still staying in the same place, sleeping on their suitcases. And the airport is just right now kind of sprinkled with these green cots that are all around, people catching a nap here and there. Other people eating dinner, eating breakfast, eating lunch on their suitcases, playing cards, watching movies. So it's a bit like an impromptu campsite here still at JFK. So things are starting to pick up pace. I know passengers are getting a bit more optimistic as the day goes on.
With a new government finally in place in Iraq, we take a look back at 2010.
The end of 2010 coincides with the end of my 2-year stint here in Baghdad. It was really an important year. You could say one of the most important years since the invasion. The 2 main milestones here this year were the Iraqi parliamentary elections in March, and 5 months later, the declared end of the American combat mission. The election got bogged down in all sorts of internal disputes, challenges once the results were posted. It dragged on for many months. The problem was the election was essentially a tie. A coalition led by Ayad Alawi, a Shia, who included many Sunnis on his list, won 91 seats. Nouri al-Maliki, who won 89. It basically left a gridlock, and rather than uniting the country, it splintered it into various factions. I think one of the interesting things you saw in the election is how much all of the neighboring countries, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey, had a vested interest in its outcome. For Iran, the main thing was to reunite a Shia coalition that would rule the country after years of Sunni dominance. Other countries, especially Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey, wanted to see the inclusion of Sunnis. They didn't want to see Iraq become another Shia-dominated government the way Iran is. And so what you saw was kind of a great game, as the ambassador put it in one of the leaked cables, between these various regional powers as well as the United States.
Operation Iraqi Freedom is over, and the Iraqi people now have lead responsibility for the security of their country.
The American withdrawal went largely without a hitch. It continued on schedule. It was all dependent. It was scheduled around the idea of having a safe, secure election. Some will say that the Americans will eventually negotiate some sort of legacy or lasting, enduring presence here beyond the 2011 deadline. But it's also possible that they could do that through contractors, through the State Department, through the traditional kind of military liaison office that most embassies around the world have. The American footprint might not be military, but it's still going to be enormous, even after the final troops withdraw.
And in another story in our series, the Catholic Church's sexual abuse scandal continues to unfold.
I express my deep sorrow to the innocent victims of these despicable crimes. I also acknowledge with you the shame.
I'm Lori Goodstein, National Religion Correspondent for the New York Times. The sexual abuse scandal in the Roman Catholic Church in the United States peaked in 2002. But 2010 was the year that the scandal spread across Europe, engulfed the Vatican, and touched on the records of 2 popes, Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI. Thousands of cases of people who said they'd been abused by priests as children emerged in Germany, in Switzerland, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, and in Ireland. For years, Vatican officials had said the sexual abuse scandal was an American problem or a problem in English-speaking countries, but now the scandal was right at their own door. The case that got the most attention in Europe this year was a case in Germany that involved the Pope himself. When he was Archbishop of Munich in 1980, a priest named Father Peter Hullermann, who had a record of pedophilia and was being treated for pedophilia, was reassigned to work in a parish. And he was still working there this year until his record was discovered. The church said that Archbishop Ratzinger was not responsible for the assignment, but the New York Times found records showing that he had attended a meeting where the reassignment was discussed and was copied on a memo. The Vatican tried to address the abuse crisis by releasing changes to its canon laws that would make it easier for bishops and quicker for them to discipline priests accused of abuse. But what should have been seen as a positive step forward for them backfired. When they released the changes in canon law, they included on a list of grave offenses not only sexual abuse of children, but also the ordination of women as priests. And the reaction to that across the board was quite negative. These cases aren't going away for the Church. Victims in Latin America, in Asia, are beginning to step forward. Sexual abuse is still a terrible taboo in many cultures, but as victims realize that they weren't the only ones, they begin to have the courage to step forward too, which is why this whole story isn't going away.
Join us again tomorrow for TimesCast.